Hello, folks. Welcome back to Reality Check with Arvind Swaminathan. You know me well enough by now. This time, we have a rather serious topic on hand. And it is serious because there's been a lot of talk about where did COVID-19 begin. Now, everyone seems to blame China. But is it China which created and let this thing loose? Let's go back a little into time. Recently, I had a WhatsApp message from somebody and a whole lot of people, and it said that the United States Supreme Court had made a ruling that the vaccine which was manufactured by the US companies was not a vaccine. Now please understand this, it's a very, very serious ruling. And why was it not a vaccine? It was not considered a vaccine because it seems it had created irreparable damage in the DNA of people in whom this vaccine was injected. Now you understand just how serious that is, which is why the US Supreme Court has ruled in such a way. Now, there is no law against this because it's almost like genetic engineering of people or human beings, which is not something we want flying around. There's no law against it apparently in the US, so we're told, but there is in Switzerland. Let me just check. I think it's yes. Yes, indeed it is Switzerland, where there is something called the Nuremberg Code, something to do with civil rights, which prohibits genetic engineering of human beings. Plus, this is Article 118 of the Nuremberg Code. The Swiss Constitution itself has an Article 119, which not only prohibits such genetic engineering, but if found guilty, it carries a 10-year prison term as penalty. Now, if this is the truth, and we can only wonder about this, how was this permitted at all? If it is correct that this ruling did happen and did take place, it explains a whole lot of things. Why, for instance, did Pfizer and the American drug companies who made this vaccine place conditions upon countries to which they sold this vaccine? Some of the conditions were almost unforgivable. I mean, how can you make such claims or put such charges on people or such conditions on people? They took, for instance, no responsibility for any side effects of these vaccines on people, which in itself is very strange, because before you release something like a vaccine, you must know what it means. You must know something about side effects which can happen and can really affect people in a very odd manner and very bad way. Now, to accept no responsibility is bad enough. But one of the other conditions imposed on those countries which bought this vaccine from Pfizer's, for instance, was that any lawsuit which is brought by any person in those countries and any awards made against the vaccine would have to be paid for by the government of that country, not by the American drug company. Now, why would they impose such conditions unless they knew beforehand something or other could go wrong, seriously wrong? The other thing that makes me wonder is this. Why is it, or how is it rather, that this vaccine was on the market within 4 to 6 months of it being declared a pandemic? Normal conditions means that a vaccine takes anything from 2 to 4 or 5 years before it can come out with reasonable safety. But these people had it within 4 to 6 months, which simply means they knew about this. They knew this was about to happen. How? Well, somebody sent me a few pictures of household products in the US, like Dettol and Lysol. And on the label it specifically said, effective against coronavirus. Now, which means that this has been known about since about 2012, or 2010 rather. The other strange thing about this, is that a few million people died as a result of COVID-19, but there were no autopsies or postmortems. Why? It's not a question of people being afraid of being infected. If they were afraid of that, why would they have gone into hospitals to treat such people? I mean, that would have been much more dangerous than performing autopsies. And without an autopsy, how do you find a proper and lasting and effective antidote? Now, it is possible that the US, after the ruling came out, the US government got busy and classified it and therefore put it out of the purview of the public. Now, when that happens, we can't prove or disprove it. Therefore, one has to be a little careful. This may have happened and it may have become classified. We're not sure about that yet. Now we go back to something else. I got another thing from YouTube, another clip from YouTube, which is done by a firm in the US, or it may be in the UK, which brought to light perhaps the biggest tax fraud in US history. Now these folk went into this about where did COVID come from? And the name they mentioned was the first person we know who was researching this particular virus was a gentleman called Dr. Baer. Now, whether it was at Chapel Hill, which is North Carolina, or Columbia University, we're not quite sure, but it's in one of these two places. And the main source was the US Army Biological Warfare Unit at Fort Detrick in Maryland, which has since been closed down. Now then, with all this research going on, this particular clip also said specifically that the CDC, or the Center for Disease Control in the US, which is an organization which is owned by the US government, applied for a patent on coronavirus. Now, that patent was granted in 2003, which is strange because look, if corona was naturally occurring, it is illegal to grant a patent. You can't patent something which is already in existence. Second, if they created this virus, then we know where it came from and who is responsible. And if they created this virus, knowing its potential, both for gain as well as for creating havoc, then it would come under what is known as gain of function research, which is illegal in 168 countries. Why? Because those 168 countries have signed up not to go in for this sort of research. So A, how was this research done? And B, how did they get a patent on it? And it is because of that patent that no autopsies could be done on people who died as a result. Why? Because under the terms of that patent, nobody can even look at the virus. Forget about trying to find an antidote to it. Nobody can even look at it. It's not permissible. Now, around 2013, the CDC it decided to wake up all of a sudden and said, hey, wait a minute, this could be illegal. So it sent a note to these folk, you're doing something wrong, it's illegal. And then he said, but don't worry, carry on. However, the moment that feeling came that maybe there's something wrong, what do? They outsourced it to Wuhan laboratories in China. It didn't go there till about 2013 or 14. And then they created a rabbit trail, as usual, for the funding to continue this research at Wuhan. Now, I know everybody blames China, but is it just China to blame, or the US as well as China? Now we begin to understand, but again we have to delve into it fully before we can say definitely US or China or both. But we do know that the effect on the whole world has been catastrophic. There are no two ways about that. I don't know how many millions have died, how many have become so ill that they're incapable of working anyway, how many lives and families have been destroyed as a result. It's mind-boggling to realize how something like this could have been done. And how was it that drug companies, even before it became a pandemic, they were ready with an antidote. An antidote which they claim could have created all sorts of side effects. If they knew about it and still created this antidote, we begin to wonder, is it the New World Order? Depopulation? Mind control? Genetic re-engineering? Now, how far down will these people sink to gain their New World Order? And who is in charge? Is it the US or China? Or which country? Or where is the headquarters of this New World Order? Now, recently there were newspaper reports in India that something like 117,000 people were just keeled over and died. Sudden heart attacks. Why did that happen? How did it happen? Was it as a result of this vaccine, which apparently they claim one of the side effects is this, sudden heart attacks? Or is it because of our lifestyle and how shall I put it, the way we live, what we eat, how we behave? That's what's causing these sudden heart attacks? For instance, people who go to a gym, they're doing their workouts, they have a massive heart attack and they're gone. One of this is this well-known stand-up comedian, Raju Srivastava, doing his stint in the gym, massive heart attack. They managed to keep him alive for a few weeks, but he died. There was another actor in his mid-40s in Mumbai. He went to the gym, did his exercises, heart attack, dead. Plus, many people may be going for a walk, another sudden heart attack. Now they call them silent heart attacks. I don't know why, because the effect is still the same. The person just drops. People go to bed at night, they don't wake up in the morning. Same thing. Why? Well, let's put it this way. We've changed our way of living. We in India, for instance, have this problem that we eat a lot of salty stuff, a lot of fried food, and a lot of pickles. We love our pickles, without understanding that it gives us very high blood pressure. Now in winter it's fine, up to a point, because we need to raise our blood pressure to keep our bodies warm. But once we get to the summer months, we have to get rid of that from our bodies. How do we do that? There are only two ways to do it: by sweating and by urine. That's all. There's no other way. Now, both of these require a large amount of water. Do we drink enough water? The answer is, I don't think we do. If you see, when you sweat in summer outside, you do this, you can feel the salt granules. Have you ever tried that? Have you ever seen that? But we don't let ourselves sweat. We live in air-conditioned houses, we travel in air-conditioned cars, we work in air-conditioned offices. And in many instances, our children are sent to air-conditioned schools. Now, how are we going to get rid of this excess salt which we keep eating? Now, another offshoot of this is we suddenly started eating rock salt. Now, rock salt, or in some places they call it Lahori salt. This is a pinkish salt in color. And yes, it brings your blood pressure down to a very low level, and people are very happy. But it has a nasty side effect. It will bring your BP down, but it will destroy your kidneys, which means you'll either need a kidney transplant from a donor or daily, you've got to get something put inside you to clean your blood out every day. Without this, you're not going to live very long. Now, the way to get around that is mix that rock salt with normal common salt 50-50 and use that. Because your kidneys must have sodium chloride or sodium. Without that, they just degenerate. The other thing is, we don't go in much for sport or walking or exercise. Most of our lives are sedentary. We keep sitting most of the time. All of a sudden we go to a gym and do all sorts of funny things. Now quite often you see a person 40, 45, he's trying to say, yeah, I'm young enough. That guy's only 30, maybe 35, but I'm as strong as he is, I'm as tough as he is. And you try and emulate what he's doing. Quite often that can give you a heart attack because your body is not able to withstand the strain. So please, now the other thing is, if you miss a couple of weeks or a couple of sessions, don't go back to it as if you hadn't been away at all. You've got to tone it down a little and take another 2 or 3 weeks to get back to the earlier level. Again, if you don't, you're asking for trouble. Years ago in school, during our school days, we were given a sort of little talk about a circus strongman who used to lift a car up from just by the bumpers when he was 25, 30. Well within his capabilities, he could do it. But when he tried to do that when he was almost 60, without the training beforehand, he burst a blood vessel and he killed him. Same person, just a lot older and out of condition. So, if you go back to a gym after a 2 or 3 week or a 2-month layoff, don't go back to what you were doing before. Cut that down to less than half. The weights you carry or you lift, tone it down to about half and take a month or 2 to build up to that previous level. Otherwise, you're asking for trouble. Now, these are basic things. Another thing, for instance, none of us, or very few of us, pay attention to this. The way we breathe. I mean, what's there to it? We've been breathing since the moment we were born. Why do we think about it? Now, a yoga teacher taught us this in school. When the older boys asked him, "Sir, how do you increase stamina?" He took a couple of paces back and he looked at them and he said, "Look, as far as I can see, all of you are breathing from your chests, which means you're using about 25 to 30% of your lung capacity. Now, instead of your chest, try breathing from down here, your diaphragm region. By doing that, you use about 80 to 90% of your lung capacity. Now, this has a few side effects. One, you're taking 3 times as much oxygen as you would if you just use your chest muscles. Result, your heart doesn't have to work quite so hard to pump it into your tissues. Your heart rate comes down. Your heart doesn't have to work as hard as it would under those other circumstances. Result is your stamina increases immediately. You don't get tired quite so quickly. I mean, for instance, what is your pulse rate when you get up in the morning? 60, 65? I had a shock when I tried doing my pulse when I woke up in the morning. It's about 48 to 50, 52. Why? Simply because I breathe from here, not from here. Now again, this is a very small thing. And yet it eases life and makes life a lot better for most of us. Now another thing, for instance, most of the disease-causing organisms that I've come across, if not all, but at least most of them, hate oxygen. To them, oxygen is poison. And yet, what do? We don't drink water. We go in for fizzy soft drinks. What is that full of? Carbon dioxide. Towards the end, I will show you a little thing about how much carbon dioxide we take in with every glass of fizzy drink that we take. What does it do? It spreads with that liquid. It's so deeply dissolved. It spreads to every part of our body. Now the heart then has to work overtime to drag all that carbon dioxide out and replace it with oxygen. If it doesn't do that, wherever it accumulates is a place where disease can begin. Any pathogen simply says, "Come on boys, party time." And you know what happens next. You're in bed, you're paying huge medical bills. You know what big hospitals are like these days. So why are you working? Why are you doing all this? Why are we inviting disaster? Why are we not using a little time to think about these things instead of blaming this injection or that vaccine? Let us first understand what is it that's behind all our problems, these heart attacks. For instance, one other thing I found recently, when you wake up in the morning and your mouth is all dry, that's a danger signal. Why? It seems if you run short of water, you go to bed around 10:30 at night, around 5, 6 a.m. is a critical time. You could have a massive heart attack then simply because your system needs water and it doesn't have it. And this apparently is what medical advice tells you. Drink enough water to make sure your mouth and throat are not dry when you get up in the morning. Now these are small things, and yet they are so important. They have such huge effects on our systems. Now, just before I wind up, let's have a look at this demo. Now you see, all this is carbon dioxide from a fizzy drink, which we're pumping inside our bodies. And this is in about 100 ml. Now watch what happens when you drop a little bit of salt in it. And it's not finished yet. There's more. And then you add a little more salt. There's more. Bit more. There's more. Now that's 4 times. Puts a little pinch of salt in there, and you see how much has come out. And you didn't finish yet, there's more. See? And then you shake it round a bit, you get more coming out. Now then, why are we pumping this into our bodies and making our hearts work overtime to drag it out and replace it with oxygen? And while it's still inside us, it's a perfect place for any pathogenic organism to start a particular disease. And then you blame this vaccine or that vaccine. Now please, until we're absolutely certain, let's not point the finger at this or that or something else. Let's look at ourselves and see, what are we doing to ourselves? Life may be easier, but it's actually getting tougher. Why? Because we ourselves are weakening our own bodies, apparently for a softer lifestyle. So please, before we know for certain, let's not blame China or the US or this vaccine or that vaccine for things which are happening today. Let's first find out. Now, can we find out without autopsies? No. If we can't do that, let's not blame this, that or the other. 117,000 people died. Why? What is the cause, the real cause of those heart attacks? Because until we find that, we're just shooting in the dark. We're guessing. And that's not helping us for the future. Well, folks, thank you. If you like, please subscribe, pass it on to your friends, ask them to pass it on to their groups, their relatives, and so on. Because this is something we must look at and must think about. Because without this, we're going to carry on shooting in the dark, trying to find reasons for all the silly things that keep happening. Thank you, folks. And I do hope you like this one because it's an important one. Thank you.